Hey, fourth grade, it's Miss Terry. Now, today we're going to be talking about cause and effect, and we're going to be reading Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. The big day arrives. Now, on Monday, we talked about how cause and effect is a cause is why something happens, and effect is what happens as a result. Okay, now as we're reading, we're going to be thinking about different cause and effects. So, the big day arrives. Right now, everyone's waiting outside the gates. But what caused them to wait outside the gates? Willy Wonka opening up his factory is one example. Now, what's the effect of that? People are excited. They're huddling around. They're really close. Now, that's a little preview of what we're about to read. Now, there's been a lot of causes and effects that we've seen before this even part. Can you list a few? All right, now, fourth grade, let's begin. The big day arrives. The sun was shining brightly on the morning of the big day, but the ground was still white with snow and the air was very cold. Outside the gates of Wonka's factory, enormous crowds of people had gathered to watch the 5 lucky ticket holders going in. The excitement was tremendous. It was just before 10 o'clock. The crowds were pushing and shouting, and policemen with arms linked were trying to hold them back from the gates. Right beside the gates, in a small group that was carefully shielded from the crowds by the police, stood the 5 famous children, together with the grown-ups who had come with them. The tall, bony old figure of Grandpa Joe could be seen standing quietly among them, and besides him, holding tightly onto his hand, was little Charlie Bucket himself. All the children except Charlie had both their mothers and fathers with them, and it was a good thing that they had, otherwise the whole party might have gotten out of hand. They were so eager to get going that their parents were having to hold them back by force to prevent them from climbing over the gates. "Be patient," cried the fathers. "Be still. It's not time yet. It's not 10 o'clock. Oh, look at all those eager people. Oh my goodness, look how happy. And there's little Charlie and Grandpa Joe. Behind him, Charlie Bucket could hear the shouts of the people in the crowd as they pushed and fought to get a glimpse of the famous children. "There's Violet Beauregarde," he heard someone shouting. "That's her all right. I can remember her face from the newspapers." "And you know what?" somebody else shouted back. "She's chewing that dreadful old piece of gum she's had for 3 months. You look at her jaws. They're still working on it." "Who's the big fat boy?" "That's Augustus Gloop." "So it is. Enormous, isn't he?" Well, now look at all those different people. "Fantastic. Who's the kid with the picture of the Lone Ranger stenciled onto his windbreaker? My bad, fourth grade. That's windbreaker. "That's Mike Teave. He's the television fiend. He must be crazy. Look at those crazy pistols he's got hanging all over him." "The one I want to see is Veruca Salt," shouted another voice in the crowd. "She's the girl whose father bought up 500,000 candy bars and then made the workers in his peanut factory unwrap every one of them until they found a golden ticket. He gives her anything she wants, absolutely anything. She only has to start screaming for it, and she gets it. Dreadful, isn't it? Shocking, I call it. Which do you think is her? That one over there on the left. The little girl is in a silver mink coat." "Which one is Charlie Bucket?" "Charlie Bucket? He must be the skinny little shrimp standing beside the old fellow who looks like a skeleton right close to us. Just there. See him?" "Why, hasn't he got a coat on in this cold weather?" "Don't ask me. Maybe he can afford to buy one. Jeepers, he must be freezing." Charlie, standing only a few paces away from the speaker, gave Grandpa Joe's hand a squeeze, and the old man looked down at Charlie and smiled. Somewhere in the distance, a church clock began striking 10, very slowly, without a loud creaking of rusty hinges. The great iron gates of the factory began to swing open. The crowd became suddenly silent. The children stopped jumping about. All eyes were fixed upon the gates. Now, oh wait, almost forgot. There he is, somebody shouted. That's him. And so it was. Now, fourth grade, think about what caused the crowd to become silent? I wonder what that is. Chapter 14, Mr. Willy Wonka. Mr. Wonka was standing all alone just inside the open gates of the factory. And what an extraordinary little man he was. He had a black hat on his head. He wore a tailcoat made of beautiful plum-colored velvet. His trousers were bottle green. His gloves were pearly gray. And in one hand he carried a fine gold-topped walking cane. Covering his chin there was a neat, pointed black beard, a goatee, and his eyes were most marvelously bright. They seemed to be sparkling and twinkling at you all the time. The whole face, in fact, was alight with fun and laughter. And oh, how clever he looked, how quick and sharp and full of life. He kept making quick, jerky little movements with his head, cocking it this way and that, and taking everything in with those bright, twinkling eyes. He was like a squirrel in the quickness of his movements, like a quick, clever old squirrel from the park. Suddenly, he did a funny little skipping dance in the snow, and he spread his arms wide, and he smiled at the 5 children who were clustered near the gates, and he called out, "Welcome, my little friends, welcome to the factory." His voice was high and fluty. "Will you come forward, one at a time, please?" he called out, "and bring your parents. Then show me your golden ticket, and give me your name. Who's first?" The big fat boy stepped up. "I'm Augustus Gloop," he said. "Augustus!" cried Mr. Wonka, seizing his hand and pumping it up and down with the terrific force. "My dear boy, oh, how good to see you. Delighted, charmed, overjoyed to have you with us. And these are your parents? How nice. Come in. That's right. Step through the gates." Mr. Wonka was clearly just as excited as everybody else. "My name," said the next child going forward, "is Veruca Salt." "My dear Veruca, how do you do? What a pleasure this is. You do have an interesting name, don't you? I always thought that Veruca was sort of a wart that you got on the sole of your foot, but it must be wrong, mustn't I? How pretty you look in that lovely mink coat. I'm so glad that you could come. Dear me, this is going to be such an exciting day. I do hope you enjoy it. I'm sure you will. I know you will. Your father, how are you, Mr. Salt and Mrs. Salt? Overjoyed to see you. Yes, the ticket is quite in order. Please go in." The next 2 children, Violet Beauregard and Mike Teeve, came forward to have their tickets examined and then to have their arms practically pumped off their shoulders by the energetic Mr. Wonka. And last of all, a small, nervous voice whispered, "Charlie Bucket?" "Charlie!" cried Mr. Wonka. Well, so there you are. You're the one who found the ticket only yesterday, aren't you?" Yes, I read up all about you this morning's papers. Just in time, my dear boy. I'm so glad, so happy for you. And this, your grandfather? Delighted to meet you, sir. Overjoyed, enraptured, enchanted. All right, excellent. Is everybody in now? 5 children? Yes. Good. Now will you please follow me? Our tour is about to begin. But do keep together. Please don't wander off by yourselves. I shouldn't like to lose any of you at this strange stage in the proceedings. Oh, dear me, no. Charlie glanced back over his shoulder and saw the great iron entrance gates slowly closing behind him. The crowds at the outside were still pushing and shouting. Charlie took a last look at them. Then, as the gates closed with a clang, all sight of the outside world disappeared. "Here we are," cried Mr. Wonka, trotting along in the front of the group. "Through this big red door, please. That's right, it's nice and warm inside. I have to keep it warm inside the factory because of the workers." Remember, because is a signal word for cause and effect. So let's see if we can find this cause and effect. "That's right, it's nice and warm inside. I have to keep it warm inside the factory because of the workers. My workers are used to an extremely hot climate. They can't stand the cold. They'd perish if they went outdoors in this weather. They'd freeze to death." "But who are these workers?" asked Augustus Gloop. "All in good time, my dear boy," said Mr. Wonka, smiling at Augustus. "Be patient. You shall see everything as we go along. Are all of you inside? Good. Would you mind closing the door? Thank you." Charlie Bucket found himself standing in a long corridor that stretched away in front of him as far as he could see. The corridor was so wide that a car could have easily been driven along it. The walls were pale pink. The lighting was soft and pleasant. How lovely and warm," whispered Charlie. "I know, and what a marvelous smell," answered Grandpa Joe, taking a long deep sniff. All the most wonderful smells in the world seemed to be mixed up in the air around them. The smell of roasting coffee and burnt sugar and melting chocolate and mint and violets and crushed hazelnuts and apple blossoms and caramel and lemon peel. And then far away in the distance from the heart of the great factory came a muffled roar of energy, as though some monstrous gigantic machine were spinning in its wheels at breakneck speed. "Now this, my dear children," said Mr. Wonka, raising his voice above the noise, "this is the main corridor. Will you please hang your coats and hats on those pegs over there? And then follow me. That's the way. Good. Everyone ready? Come on then. Here we go." He trotted off rapidly down the corridor with the tails of his plum-colored velvet coat flapping behind him, and the visitors all hurried after him. It was quite a large party of people. When you came to think of it, there were 9 grown-ups and 5 children, 14 in all. So you can imagine that there was a good deal of pushing and shoving as they hustled and bustled down the passage, tried to keep up with the swift little figure in front of them. "Come on," cried Mr. Wonka. "Get a move on, please. We'll never get round today if you dawdle like this." Soon he turned right off the main corridor into another slightly narrow passage. Then he turned left, then left again, then right, then left, then right, then right, then left. The place was a gigantic rabbit warren, with passages leading this way and that in every direction. "Don't you let go of my hand, Charlie," whispered Grandpa Joe. "Notice how all these passages are sloping downwards," called Mr. Wonka. "We are now going underground. All the most important rooms in my factory are deep down below the surface." I wonder why they're deep down below the surface. What would cause them to be deep down the surface? "Why is that?" somebody asked. "There wouldn't be nearly enough space for them up top," answered Mr. Wonka. "These rooms we are going to are enormous. They're larger than football fields. No buildings in the world would be big enough to house them. But down here, underneath the ground, I've got all the space I want. There's no limit, so long as I hollow it out." Mr. Wonka turned right. He turned left. He turned right again. The passages were sloping sloping steeper and steeper downhill now. Then suddenly Mr. Wonka stopped. In front of him there was a shiny metal door. The party crowded round. On the door, in large letters, it said, "The Chocolate Room." All right, the next chapter is The Chocolate Room. Now, fourth grade, if you don't know this, Miss Terry loves The Chocolate Room, so I really want to keep reading, but we're going to have to wait till Friday. Oh my goodness, I wonder what The Chocolate Room is going to be all about. How exciting. We already found out about what Mr. Willy Wonka looks like and how he's short and very charming, but he's very quick. Now, remember fourth grade, this week we're focusing on cause and effect. Now, cause is why something happens, and the effect is what happens as a result. Now, some of you might have seen the movie or know about this story. Before we read the next upcoming chapters, think about the cause and effects of what happens with little kids that misbehave. All right, fourth grade, have a great day. Bye.